Welcome to The Leading Edge, an MIT webinar series focused on the latest in technology, innovation, and industry, brought to you by MIT's Industrial Liaison Program. Today's event, Day 2 of the Innovation Journeys 2020, featuring Harveen Chug, Richard Templer, Yet Ming Chang, and Lisa Perkins. And now for our host, Harveen Chug.
You're live.
Okay, hello and a very warm welcome to the second session of the 2020 Innovation Series Journey, an event that is brought to you by Imperial College London and MIT in partnership with BT. I'm Harveen Chug and I teach entrepreneurship and strategy at Imperial College London. Today, we will focus on the technologies and the solution that will bring us to a better tomorrow. We want to explore what is happening already, what is in the pipeline, and what are the factors in the ecosystem that will ensure these advances will have the right impact. To explore this, we will be talking to two academic leaders with a successful entrepreneurial record, 4 exciting startups that are changing the world as we speak, and an industry leader who works on bringing the latest innovations to fruition for businesses and across industries around the world. We'll also be running a couple of polls, so please do join us along the way if this, when this takes place. In fact, I have the first question for you now, which is, has the pandemic slowed down and reduced investment in climate technology, in climate tech? You've got 3 answer options: yes, no, or not sure. While you take a moment to complete the poll, let me introduce you to Professor Richard Templer. He is Director of Innovation at the Grantham Institute for Climate Change, where we have helped 64 startups raise over $250 million, and he is an advisor to the Mayor's Office on Clean Tech. He will be sharing his views on clean tech investment and trends in business and climate action. Very excited to hear from you, Richard. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Harveen. In fact, there was a lot of toing and froing about what I might talk about. And we've decided collectively that I should talk about the lessons we've learned for climate change action during the pandemic. Earlier this year, which I have to say seems like it's a lifetime ago, my team and I were raising funds for our Centre for Climate Change Innovation, something that we're doing with the Mayor. Anyway, everything was going really well. You know, we were getting a lot of traction. And then the pandemic happened. And I thought, oh, here we go again. I've been, going at this problem of creating this centre for about 5 years. And once again, climate change action won't be a priority for the corporates that we're talking to. And that was because I thought the pandemic is going to swallow up everybody's attention in these businesses, and the free funds that they were intending to direct to us will be redirected to coping with the effects of COVID-19. My talk is going to be a reflection on what actually happened after we locked down up to the current date in terms of the investment in climate technologies. So I'm now staring at the polls. So 20% of you are saying that actually the pandemic has slowed things down, 35% say no, and a lot of you, the majority, 44%, say not sure, don't know. Well, it's perhaps very, very contrary to what you'd expect. But it turns out I should have not been so depressed on the day that we locked down, because raising the funds for our centre and also raising investment in funds that our startups are doing has not been harder. In fact, it's been easier. And so what I wanted to explore was what it is that is going on. Why is it that COVID, the pandemic, has actually made it easier to raise funding? And I think it tells a very interesting story. And just so you're warned, you'll have a poll at the end of all of this to answer, so get ready for that as well. So what I'm going to tell you is in part informed by my own experiences and the conversations I've had with business, but it's also relating to other colleagues who've also been experiencing the same things. So ultimately what I'm really going to talk about is the hard business lessons that business has learned during the pandemic. So let me actually start off by looking at what COVID was like, and then go on to climate change and draw some parallels and some distinctions between the two of them. So scientists like me were telling politicians that a pandemic in the near future was pretty much inevitable and that we should be getting prepared for it. And indeed, various government departments were listening to us, but our words didn't really carry. The pandemic happened, and we were not prepared. I think that's pretty obvious. And one of the things that really interested me at the time, actually still does, is that we were not resilient, to what was going on. And it seemed like the just-in-time models of production and distribution and sale had created a kind of crippling inability to respond to the pain and the chaos that we were experiencing. Ultimately, the cost that we are bearing and will be bearing was much greater than the cost of being resilient. In other words, being able to stock up on things and be prepared for things. Well, I mean, that's I think is quite a strong lesson for businesses. But the reality in a historical sense is the pain and the chaos that we've experienced and continue to experience will in historical terms pass quite quickly. We've had a short, sharp shock in historical terms, and we will recover eventually, right? I mean, we will get over this. So if we compare that to climate change, well, scientists like me have been telling anybody who cares to listen, including governments and business and the public, for just over 40 years, that our human activity is driving a warming of the planet. And we've been poo-pooed and people haven't listened terribly much, except over the last couple of years. That's why things were going well before lockdown. However, it does mean that we've been slow to prepare. So we were effectively unprepared for COVID, but we've been slow to prepare. We've got knowledge and we've been slow to prepare. So there's a need for us to accelerate and be ready and prepared. Now, COVID is bad, right? It's horrible. But the pain, the chaos, and the cost of climate change is going to be much greater. It's going to be like being ground down over several centuries if we don't watch out. And it means that we know exactly what we need to do. We need to decarbonize and we need to be climate resilient and we need to get on with it. Let's not be as unprepared as we were for COVID. So it's a bigger problem. It's already happening. Actually, I don't know why I'm talking about it as something in the future. It's already happening, but it will last. Even as we act, it will last for several centuries, not several years, but several centuries. And unlike COVID, it will require wholesale and permanent changes to the way that humans live, how we live, work, and all the things that we do. Now that sounds grim, right? Oh God, tell me something I don't know. Well, it's not just a challenge for us; it's also an opportunity, and it's an opportunity that we have to take because this challenge is not going to go away. And it's also, although I'm from a technical university, and of course my colleagues at MIT are as well, this is about more than just technological fixes. There's a lot of thinking needs to go on in terms of business models, policies, and human behavior. It's a really complicated thing, but a really exciting thing because the future will be very different from the past century. And I think what COVID maybe told us in the better moments was that actually the future could be better. There are things maybe that we forgot that we valued that COVID reminded us of, and that responding to climate change can reveal and be part of what it means to be prosperous. Anyway, the major message that I think people and the companies that I was talking to had learned from COVID is that Mother Nature is implacable. It didn't really matter what your political persuasion was, what your business model was, what you thought should happen. Mother Nature just does what she does, and she'll just steamroll you. You have to respond to what she's going to deliver to you. Business recognized it was not prepared for COVID, and that was pretty disastrous. And the companies that I was talking to realized that they were actually paddling too slowly on climate change, and the threat from climate change was worse, and that they actually now was not the time to stop investing because they feel that the future is coming to them much faster than they were expecting. And that if they want to prosper, if they want to lead, they need to prepare for climate change, and they need to get fast. They need to speed up. And speeding up and the response seems to mean a whole lot of things. And we're going to be talking about some of those, but this is a slightly random collection of things that have come to my attention. The first of them is education, and that they need to invest in education as businesses. They need to know how climate change will affect them, and they need to know what it is they can do. And the best businesses are actually turning out to be quite humble now, and they realize that they need to do some learning, and that's really great news. The next one is a kind of parallel to that, which is they need to invest in ideas. They need to catalyze the innovation that they determine will make a difference to their ability to prosper into the future. And that means that when you've got a startup accelerator and you've got innovation activities within a center, they're interested in all of that. And that's what created a lot of the buy-in to what we were trying to do. The other thing is quite deep. They also recognize they need to invest in their people, and that a company is not just going to be climate ready because the C-level of the company is climate ready, but that everybody needs to be on board, and everybody needs to be mindful of what they're doing and how what they're doing can affect and enhance the reputation, the functioning of their company against the challenges and opportunity of climate change. And then the last couple of things that I'll talk about just before we have the poll are more complicated and more challenging. So every single one of your businesses is part of a value chain, and you cannot do climate change innovations in absentia of that value chain. In other words, you have to do systemic innovation. You have to work with your value chain to really optimize the opportunities that you can all get from addressing the challenges that face us. And the other thing is the bit that really gets me out of bed every morning feeling a cold sweat. And that is, we've really not got much time. This decade is crucial to whether we prosper or whether we find civic society being damaged by climate change. So doing innovation at very high speed, for very large scales, means you don't want to make mistakes. And making mistakes is what happens when you don't talk with your stakeholders while you're doing your innovation. So I think a big message that I really like people to take away is that you need to learn how to do innovation whilst having dialogue, meaningful dialogue with all of your stakeholders. Anyway, that is kind of those are my handful of messages. I'm actually feeling positive because business's response has been so positive, and I think is going to drive the green recovery that we need. We do not need to invest in the past. We need to invest in the future, and the future is green. So the last poll question, if it could go up, is your company moving fast enough in making the transition to a low carbon, climate resilient future? So over to you. I'd like to see what you think. By the way, I'm looking off to the side, not because I'm worried, but because the scores are going to come in to my side. I'm hoping you guys have done your voting now. Kwan Lee, tell me what the scores are now. I don't know, Harveen, maybe there's been a problem with the poll.
There is 33% yes and 40% no.
Okay, and 27% not sure. Well, look, that is really interesting. I love the third of you who feel that you are on par for achieving the goals you need to achieve. Sadly, I believe that many of us are in the 40%, and we need to change that. So I hope you'll listen to my colleagues and gain inspiration and feel that you can make a difference and move your company in a decent direction. So thank you very much for your attention. And I think Harveen and I are now going to have some Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. And I think that's a great note to leave it on where you finished up, which was on a lot of the businesses being in the 40%, and what we can continue to discuss today is how what those businesses can do. So we'll kind of open to if questions come in from the audience, and I've got some questions that I've been lining up while you were speaking as well. And I wanted to kick off by just summarizing some of the key themes. You talked about preparation and resilience, and COVID has really made us see how prepared are we for something like a pandemic, let alone climate change. So we always hear these things are coming, but how much do we really start acting on those? So one of the things that you mentioned was just-in-time manufacturing. And it's quite interesting, something that was more popular with the businesses a few years ago. Do you feel that's something that's slipped? That's something businesses need to get back to? Could you tell us a bit more?
No, so I mean I think they're very big. So let me start off everything that says I'm not some seer. I do not know the answers to everything. So these are going to be at the moment opinions, and I hope they appear as questions for all of us to address. Just-in-time manufacture is a product of maximizing profit, right? It's taking a type of capitalist economics that really got kicked off in the early 80s, and it seems to me that it works within the parameters it sets itself when you've got an equilibrium economic situation. It is no longer the case. We are not in any sense in an equilibrium phase of human history. We are going through huge amounts of change, and we are facing big crises. And those are the times when equilibrium economics just doesn't work. It also presupposes that all value is monetizable. And I dare say that, that what COVID has taught us is that lives do matter, that we are part of communities. We probably all know people who died from COVID. And certainly in the UK, which I can speak about more clearly, we were, in frankly, sad and pathetic position of not being able to give people the masks and protective gear they needed in hospitals because we didn't have the supplies to hand. We also didn't have the manufacture to hand. We didn't have the we weren't distributed manufacturing. We were sort of, we were reliant on others located somewhere else. And what we ended up in the very early months of COVID was chaos. And I'd like us to reflect on that and say, let's stop trying to monetize everything and respect the fact that there are some economic activities that we do because they're simply important to other aspects of our lives and other aspects of societal cohesion. I don't think governments are going to solve this for us. I think that companies are, and what I see in companies is that the pressure on CEOs now comes in many cases from employees, and employees wanting to work for companies that are doing the right thing. What the right thing is needs to be sorted out, and my call is to really think about these things. And just in time is just one example of many things.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. We have a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is written for, as a newborn child. Theirs is the future that we cannot see, even in our dreams. The history of futurology is littered with examples that prove this. So how can we best evolve strategy for a climate change future?
Crikey, whoever said that, I hate you already, all right? It's a dreadfully good question. And I doubtless won't answer it completely satisfactorily, so I apologize in advance. I think I would kind of turn this question, not turn it around, but I would start it off like this. You're right, predicting the future is a fool's game. In other words, what will work in order to match up to the challenges of climate change and indeed species extinction. There are a lot of challenges that are all coupled together that we need to address. Choosing winners, technically speaking, is the wrong way to do this. I think we need to learn how to really implement describing the outcomes we are seeking, and to do that based on the best science that we have available, the best business sense that we have available, the best dialogue we have with society in order to reach a joint conclusion of where it is we want to get. The getting there is also a process that we need to do better. So we need to think about how we do that. And there is a group of us at Imperial, Oxford University, and a number of other UK universities that are actually trying to do this. We're trying to figure out how it is that you engage in purposeful dialogue with all of the stakeholders while you're doing innovation. And I don't know, I cannot predict, because there's no counterfactual, I cannot predict whether we'll come to a solution that will be the best optimal solution for our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids and all the rest of it. But I think I would kind of cast it like this. I want to set the circumstances, provide them with the tools and the support that they need in order to determine their future and their children's future. Sounds very motherhood and apple pie stuff, but there is some meat in there.
No, absolutely, and that is a very big question. But I think really the key is that the time is now. The second question that's come in is that businesses can and do set high-level goals, but how do we translate these into everyday decision making? Perhaps is there an example that you can give us?
Yeah, I can. Oh, thank you for that question.
I've
So,
probably got about a minute for that one. Thanks, Richard.
okay, right. I have an example. The example is from Sainsburys in the UK. We've been working with them for 10 years. They set high-level goals that they were setting themselves to achieve. They put money aside for it, but most importantly, they put governance in place within the company, which had great levels of power. So there's a group of people who had oversight and who are running the show and could tell a store manager, you need to do X, Y, or Z. And it's not mundane. It's really practical, and it really moves things along. And I'm very proud to have been a small part of that. But the credit goes to the guys who were in the centre and telling people this is what you have to do.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, we do have a bit more time, so we could expand on that one, but I've also got another question come in here. Should it not be that governments that prepare and pay for the emergency, should it not be that governments prepare and pay for emergency response rather than blaming companies for focusing on profit? Planned stockpiling could have saved lives. What are the steps that you can advise to best prepare for the future?
Okay, so I think this is a really good point. And I would like to sort of think that if we look at climate change, there's been public protests, right? The school kids protests in the UK, at least we've had Extinction Rebellion. They've made a ruckus. Government has found it very hard to ignore them, right? They're in your face. And certainly your children are always going to be there every evening saying, Mum, Dad, what are you guys doing about this? So government has been confronted with voters wanting them to do stuff. The voter doesn't know what that stuff is. Scientists, engineers, technologists, and businesses do. We at least have ideas. That's what we're going to be talking about later on today. I think there's an axis that we should be forming between knowledge institutions and business to be actively lobbying and telling governments that not just that there are challenges to be addressed, which there are, but also that there's opportunities to be grasped. And then if we, you know, whatever nation you're in, if our nation doesn't grasp these, we're going to be also RANs. We're going to be reliant on others for protection. And that's what happened to the UK. We were reliant on others for PPE. It's not a good place to be. Let's not be in that place for climate change. So I guess I want business to become a little bit political on the side of society at large.
Okay, yeah, and I think core to what you're saying is that businesses need to become better prepared and equipped. It's kind of, I think everybody's waiting for somebody else to take that action, but actually, if that's one thing that COVID has taught us, it's that
actually, Harvey, could I add something else? Just as you said, that made me think that. Sure. You know, all of us, and I include universities in this, so all of us organizations sitting in a sector, we are used to lobbying for our sector. The time for doing that is over. We need to, you know, like I said, you're part of a value chain. You need to have dialogue with society. That means all of our businesses need to think big. They need to think beyond our front doors. They need to engage. It's our responsibility as humans to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think no, I agree. I think it's like you said, the conversation's been had internally, and now's the time to take it broader, engage with more stakeholders, and really key to that is building partnerships as a first point, looking at those examples like you mentioned, Sainsburys, and that will certainly help lead us there. Brilliant. I think that brings us nicely to the end of the session. I'd really like to thank you, Richard, for your talk and for the questions, and we'll have more time for audience questions a bit later.
It's been a pleasure, even virtually. I missed audience. I've missed not being able to see you, but it's been lovely.